All Things Bike with Fred Thomas is brought to you by Frame and Wheel, eBay selling services for cyclists and bike shops throughout New England, and AD Bikes, the modern face of Austro-Daimler cycling and the bike company of the future.
Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. I'm Fred Thomas, and you are watching another episode of All Things Bike, a new program dedicated to the bicycle, the culture of the bicycle, and the people and the organizations that make the bicycle community roll here and away. We have a very interesting show for you tonight. We will be speaking with two physician cyclists about concussions. We will be speaking with Stuart Abromson of Maine Medical Center in Portland, and we will be speaking with Seth Flynn of the Midcoast Hospital in Brunswick. So, Stuart, Seth, welcome to All Things Bike. I am amazed that I remembered most of that. If I had had a concussion, it might have been harder or not possible, but I did. Now, the next question for you is, have you ridden your bikes today?
I have not ridden my bike yet.
It's okay, it's okay. It's
I'm hoping we better get moving because I have to get home.
Yeah. Well, no, don't worry, we will. You got to get your hours. And but then again, it's 22 degrees out. You know, it's better that you ride indoors than outdoors.
Yeah, I spent some time on my trainer this morning.
Good for you, good for you. Well, we're here to talk about concussions, and both of you guys have experienced it personally and professionally, and it's an important topic. A question for you, Stuart, what is a concussion?
So I guess in the simplest term, it's trauma to the head that leads to a temporary neurologic change.
Right.
And I think the easiest way to think about it is to go over an event that we experienced one Saturday morning a few years back, where one of our friends riding in the pack on the double loop crashed because of a stick and went down.
I remember that. Yeah.
Hit his head, and not clear if he lost consciousness or not, but got up fairly quickly. Clearly had been injured, and we spoke to him, and he actually got back on his bike, and we started riding, not with the group, but riding to take him to the hospital. We didn't decide that he should go by car, we decided he should ride. Questionable in hindsight. And it was interesting, I was talking to him, he was confused, he was disoriented. He couldn't remember what had happened, what brought him there, what ride it was. Or he couldn't remember after the event. He'd ask me what happened, I'd tell him, and then he'd ask me again.
Wow.
So he had hit his head, and he had these symptoms, which I think was pretty good for a description of what a concussion is.
Right. So, and they were pretty clear too. I mean, are there other symptoms that you can think of, Seth? I mean, when people come into the emergency room, do they can't remember their names? They don't know stuff like that. What else might pop up?
The gentleman you spoke about, many of those symptoms are extremely common. Having loss of consciousness briefly, having amnesia, before the accident and sometimes after the accident as well. And more commonly, less severe things are headaches or feeling a pressure in your head. Sometimes being confused, not being able to concentrate, maybe a little short-term memory loss temporarily. And there's other things like sensitivity to light, sensitivity to sound. You can get some nausea, as well as light vomiting sometimes. And there's also things like vertigo, dizziness.
What about emotion, sort of an extreme sort of change in the emotions, like either extremely sad or euphoric? I mean, is that, or is that shock?
Initially, yes, absolutely. You can have people can be very irritated and
Right.
sometimes angry.
Right.
More later effect, yes, can be depression and other changes in mood
Right.
that usually resolve.
Yeah.
Not always.
Well, that's a good lead into the next question. Is so you might know or suspect that you have a concussion. What's the next step? You get to the hospital and they check you out. I mean, what's the recovery pathway, or what's the next thing that you're supposed to do?
Well, I think the most important thing is, even before they get to they're on the road,
Yeah.
they've fallen,
Mhm.
they maybe have symptoms of a concussion, you don't let them get back on that bike.
Right.
They cannot ride again
I see.
until they get evaluated,
Right.
until those concussive symptoms resolve. And someone who's a professional needs to be able to say, okay, it's time, it's
Yeah.
okay to get back.
Right.
Otherwise, you're putting the person, or they're putting themselves at significant
Serious
risk
risk.
for
Right.
for
For
permanent
something
disability.
worse, yeah. So that's what I can do, really. If I'm not the emergency technician, but there's an incident and people falling down, looks like they might have hit their head. As the first responder, I mean, what would I do? I mean, I'm not an emergency room guy, but
Yeah, if the symptoms are concerning enough, definitely not getting on the bike is the very first thing to do.
right.
And if they're concerning enough, particularly with loss of consciousness, amnesia,
Yeah.
severe headaches, things like that, calling 911. and
Just
getting
call an
there.
ambulance.
Yeah.
And keep the helmet too, apparently. That was, can I ask a little bit about your experience, your personal experience with a concussion? It was in a bike race. In fact, I was there. I wasn't in the race, but that was one of the things that I hadn't thought about, is that they were looking around for your helmet because they wanted to see where and how hard you would hit your head. What was the background there?
So this was the end of a bike race, and a car, I'm told, because although I don't remember it, a car pulled in front of us, and a number of us went down, and I went down the hardest, and I was brought to the hospital about over 20 minutes,
Yeah.
and a couple of my friends, and I think maybe you were there.
Absolutely.
So I think you can almost describe better than I can
Yeah.
what I was like.
You were known as the bike man.
Yeah. So
Where's the bike
initially,
man?
I think I was talking,
Yeah.
although I didn't know really that I was the one that had been in the accident.
Really?
So I was confused about who I was.
Interesting.
Because I was starting to play the role of the emergency physician,
Right.
where I started to describe what should be done about me.
Is that right?
But it's important. I didn't have a concussion. I
Mhm.
had, in the traumatic brain injury spectrum, I
Right.
had a little bit worse than that.
I
So
see.
my symptoms lasted significantly worse, more than 30 minutes, and I actually got worse before I got better, which happens quite a bit in the moderate traumatic brain injury. So where I was talking and a little confused, but I was communicating with people.
Yeah.
I stopped talking over the next 12 hours.
Is that right? Yeah.
And so I wasn't communicating at all for about 12 hours, and didn't recognize my wife. And
Wow.
And then over about 24 hours, I started to figure out who I was and recognize my wife. She was very happy
That was
about
it.
that.
Yeah.
And
your
then
children?
it took probably a number of weeks and then months to recover.
And you had to take it really easy, so you weren't riding your bike. I mean, but
Right, I
to
wasn't
lie
riding my
down.
bike. I was out of work.
Right.
I was completely out of work for
Right.
about 3.5 months, and then partially out of work up to 6 months.
Right.
So it took a long time, and
Right.
that's not uncommon.
Wow.
So that people with more significant brain injuries can take
Yeah.
years.
That's it's really valuable to know that. I think a lot of us, we get on our bikes and we slap on our helmet and we're like, yeah, I'm fine. But the helmet is only going to do so much if you hit your head hard enough.
Well, I was unfortunately cycling alone when my accident happened.
Right.
And I have complete amnesia from prior to the accident to a good hour afterward. But what I've pieced together was I blew crossing train tracks that were coming on a very sharp angle, a little wet that morning. So I'm assuming my wheels just went out from under me. And looking at my helmet, it looks like I hit my head right off the railroad track.
We're right on the actual rail.
Yeah. So from between when my bike was stopped until my first phone call was 11 minutes. So I'm assuming I was out of consciousness for some of that time. But yeah, so then I did call 911 a couple minutes later. I have a brief 5-second memory of that call.
Jeez.
I was sitting on the ground and they were asking me where I was, and I couldn't tell them where I was. I was looking around, didn't recognize anything. I knew exactly where I was, but I could not tell them that.
You didn't know what street you were on, or you.
I couldn't. I didn't have
that level
ability,
of detail.
yeah.
Just wasn't there.
And then, so the next memory I have is being in the ambulance, and another like 5-second memory. So, and asking them, where I had the accident was probably 5 minutes away from the hospital I work at.
All right.
So I asked them if we were going to Midcoast Hospital, and they said no, they diverted me to Maine Med. And then I got angry because that's again it's a symptom. Got upset, and I asked them, which doctor diverted me then to Maine Med? And then of course I asked, is my bike okay? And they said it looked okay. So the next thing I wake up, I'm in the trauma room at Maine Medical Center, and then things start to come around. Apparently I was able to tell them who I was, my date of birth, things like that, about halfway down to the trip to Portland. Wow. But then I kind of went in and out for another 4.5 hours, and then getting a CAT scan of my head and neck. And
but did it hurt? I mean, in both your experiences, is it a searing, bell-ringing pain, or is it?
Well, where I don't remember, I'm not really sure. But when my memory did come back, that's one symptom I never had, which was kind of surprising. I never had a headache, and I never had any head pressure.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. So,
Which is, well, maybe it's not unusual, but it's one thing that people really complain about. So I certainly know people who have had concussions or more significant brain injury, and headaches are a big part of that.
Right. Wow. Well, that's really interesting. Thank you both for sharing that, and it's valuable because it makes people realize how serious it is, and how it manifests itself, and people will know. And we're going to take a short break, thanks, and we'll be right back with more about concussions.
Three feet could mean the difference between life and death. Give at least 3 feet of clearance when passing bicyclists. It's the law. Learn more about bicycle safety at www.bikemaine.org.
Hello, everybody. We are back. We are talking about concussions with Stuart Abromson and Seth Flynn. Seth is going to show us a new kind of helmet that is, I've never heard of it, but it's out there, and it's a great thing. It helps improve safety. So, explain. It's a MIPS is the
MIPS
accident?
is the name. It's usually identified by a yellow sticker on the helmet. And many brands make helmets with this incorporated. And what MIPS stands for is called a multi-directional impact protection system.
Right.
So what the company has figured out is that most testing for helmets has always been direct impact.
Right.
But in reality, most accidents are rotational in impact.
Yeah.
And so they took that into consideration and advised a system. There's a shell system inside a normal helmet with normal standard EPS foam, which slides and moves as you hit on the ground. So that takes that rotational force away from the brain and decreases the overall force and impact on the head and the brain by a little over 30%.
Wow. That's I mean that's a lot. And that's important. Yes. That makes a difference. Were you wearing a helmet like that?
No, unfortunately not.
No, I mean I've never heard of it. So
neither was I.
Yeah.
But I do wear one now.
Yes.
Really? Okay. Well, I need to renew my subscription to Bicycling Magazine, because I'm sure that's where a lot of these innovations can be found. I mean, I suppose it reinforces the notion that if you are going to invest in cycling, investing in a good helmet is well worth it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's right. We wanted to come back to the idea of some observations about long-term treatment for concussions. It's clear that it takes more than months to get over it. Talk about that.
So I guess the way they describe it, or they name it, as post-concussive syndrome.
Right.
And the concussion is gone,
right.
But a lot of the long-term side effects linger, and they may linger for many years. Difficulty concentrating, mood lability, sometimes trouble with coordination. Sometimes
motor skills, right?
Sometimes trouble with relationships. Certainly depression, sleep problems.
Wow.
And there are medications to help somewhat with some of these symptoms, but there isn't really any medication that can get the concussion better. So sometimes medicines to help sleeping, medicines for depression can help.
Right.
But some people with post-concussive symptoms really have a devastating impact on their life. They've they've been divorced. They've lost jobs.
Wow.
And it's not only because of cognition. Sometimes it's irritability.
Right. And this stems even from a mild concussion, or is this? To have these symptoms come through, do you have to be a very severe concussion, or can it even be a mild one?
It can be a mild
Even
one.
a mild
so
one?
my experience with some people I know have had mild concussion or concussions.
Right.
So a couple of concussions, especially both mild. Thinking
Well,
of someone who now has significant symptoms, is unable to hold down a job, has been divorced.
Right.
And it's always hard to tell how much is the concussions, but it certainly seems the timing seems like that's
related to it.
That's related, and a support system is essential. For me, my family was essential to help me get through it and work and that sort of thing.
Right. Are there other resources that you know of available that would help people who really are struggling with life after a concussion? Are they available through hospitals or public services?
Not that many, unfortunately. This is a very new field.
I guess that's true.
They've come up with some testing to evaluate your progress, and then other testing called impact testing, which is used commonly with high school
for kids,
high school all the way up to professional level, because that does a baseline testing when you're perfectly normal, and then if you have a concussion, it goes back and compares.
Right.
And there's several other kind of tests that come up with one's called SCAT, or Standardized Concussion Assessment Tool, or ACE, or Acute Concussion Evaluation.
Right.
And these basically just help healthcare providers follow you through and make sure you're on the right progress. But this is a very new field of science. It's they only discovered it not long ago, and
that's
we're
true.
still learning a lot every day.
And we read mostly about it as how it relates to football and boxing, I suppose.
Yes.
But cycling, all I know is the USA Cycling website does have a pretty comprehensive, background for what to do in case of concussion. We're going to have to wrap up soon, but judgment is a key thing. After a concussion, you have terrible judgment. Is it true?
I would say it is true, especially during that concussive episode. That during the confusion time, when actually the person who's just had the concussion is most susceptible to another injury, that's when they're making the worst decisions.
So within the first 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
So
I'm fine.
while they're still confused, that's when you really want to keep them off the bike, and someone has to take over and say, no, you're not.
Right.
You're not driving home. You're not.
It's
you're not
just
riding your
my
bike.
head.
Yeah.
So if they say it's just my head,
So yes, that's an important part of you.
Get a ride. Stuart, Seth, thanks very much
you, Fred.
for coming down and talking about that. It was really useful, really interesting. That was Seth Flynn of Midcoast Hospital and Stuart Abromson of Maine Medical Center talking to us about concussions. You can learn more at the Center for Disease Control, at the Heads Up program, and also on USA Cycling. Don't go away. We're going to be right back with Josh Freeman and Fix My Bike.
Three feet could mean the difference between life and death. Give at least 3 feet of clearance when passing bicyclists. It's the law. Learn more about bicycle safety at www.bikemaine.org.
Good evening, everybody. We are back, and we are here with Josh Freeman of Freeman's Bicycle Service, and Josh is going to show us how to take pedals off of our bikes. Happy New Year! Happy New Year!
Happy New Year. Yeah.
Thanks for coming down and helping us sort out this problem. It's never as easy to take the pedals off of a bike.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's different. So I mean, let's start with this guy. How would we do it? What are the tricks?
Well, I think there's not such a variety of pedals, but I think the most common pedal is a 15 millimeter a tool that you'll need to be able to remove a pedal. It's the most common tool.
Right.
And just a square-headed tool, such as a flat pedal that we have here.
Right.
And with that, whatever pedals you have, let's say that you do have a specific pedal that needs a specific tool.
I see. Yeah.
Purchase that tool from your local bike shop, and be sure to have it all the time, because the most common question I have is how do I remove my pedals, or I've tried to install them, and it's very difficult which way to go.
And there's a trick to it, because the threads are reversed.
That's right.
And I can never remember which way it works, and lots of times the pedals are on there really hard, and so you're pushing hard in each direction, you don't know whether you're tightening or loosening.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes you're trying to catch a flight because you're trying to pack your bike, so we don't want to be in that position. So well, what are the tricks? What are there rules of thumb?
It's the one thing I've said, and I'm not sure if it ever sticks. It sticks with me because I always try to stick with the same simple ways to do things. And, the right side of the bicycle, which is your drive side, drive meaning the drivetrain is on the right side. And the most common way we thread things is righty-tighty.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'll explain it as the right pedal is right.
Oh yeah, right. Okay, got it.
So it's the way we're normally used to threading in things.
Right.
Right is right, left is wrong.
Ah, yeah. Okay, so righty-tighty works on the drive side, on the crank side. Doesn't work on the other side.
On the non-drive side, exactly. So the non-drive is a reverse threaded pedal.
Right.
And so with that, we've always had stands here on the show, which is very useful to have. And I think if anybody is interested in all the ways to work on your bike, a stand is the best way to go.
Changes your life, no question about it.
Exactly. And so that's why we always have it, because it's so much simpler to have a stand to work on your bicycle. You spend so much money on a bicycle. Put a little bit of investment into a good stand.
Make it easier to work on.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so with that, it's easier to remove pedals when it's on a bike stand. Even if it's leaning against the wall, I could show you how to do that. But it's the same idea. So I brought in a variety of wrenches, if you will. Common Shimano pedals have a 6 mil or a 15 mil head on them.
Right.
Why pedal wrenches are important is because it's a very narrow area as
That's right.
opposed to an adjustable wrench.
You can't use your traditional hardware store standard adjustable crescent wrench to take the pedals off. You make it, right. I think I learned that one the hard way.
Yeah, and so what I've learned from experienced mechanics is that when they travel with their toolboxes and try to lighten up their toolboxes, they just put two 15 millimeter cone wrenches taped together. It gives it enough meat.
Yep.
And you actually don't need that much leverage. They don't need to be that tight on the bicycle.
Yeah, that's right.
So with that, the pedals that you have on your bicycle is an 8 millimeter hex head that you can get. I like this tool. It has a nice grip to it, dummy handle, if you will.
That's a
And to remove it, it's on the inside of the pedal spindle.
Right.
And so that 8 mil will end up going on the inside. We know right is right, so right is righty-tighty. We're going to lefty-loosey. You just kind of have to make sure you haven't had a concussion. And we're going to turn it around. So my left hand is grabbing the non-drive side crank, which is back here. And I'm making sure it's nice and settled inside the axle, which for anybody is not exactly easy. So this may be not as great a leverage, but since we loosened them up, it's going to look like it's really easy. And so I'll go, and I'm going to push, and I'll slowly be able to remove that pedal. This one has a ball end on this end, which is really handy. For this specific pedal, if you have it on your bicycle, you should have the tool. And I'm loosening it.
Wow, and there it is.
And so there's that.
Righty-tighty on the crank side. Well, let's just, we're running short on time.
Okay.
Let's do it on this bike.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because this is, a lot of people have pedals.
So this is an inexpensive way to have a stand at your home. It's just a little wheel display holder. And with that, if you do, and if your pedals are really tight and you get a nice long lever wrench, you get over the bicycle. When I grab this side, since it's the left non-drive side, I'm actually grabbing this, pulling up, and then pushing down with my left.